Someone is listening right now and they're thinking, this sounds really interesting. I'd like to get part in that and start my AI journey. What do they really do? Should they go to the website?
How does it work?
How do they find the actual call? I guess is it open right now? How do they practically do if someone wants to try the journey into AI, so to speak?
Yeah, I think at the moment we don't have a call that is open on that. But what they could do is to contact a good organization that has experience. Well, Peltarian is one. They could hook up to AI Sweden, for example, and organizations such as that. And we have also done a review of the first 30 organizations that did their first AI journey. So that report is available as well. So read through that. But I think that the key lesson really is to start with a real problem or a real opportunity in your organization.
But let's go in here, because we are assuming the people knows what a call is. We are assuming they've ever been to the Vinnova website. We have an assumption that they have any clue how to get money out of, you got 3.5 billion. I want 500,000. What do I do? How do I do it?
Yeah, good question. And I think it's the easiest thing is really, don't bother about things that I said before in terms of areas, but go to our website, look at the different calls, which we call
What is a call?
Yeah, so a call is a setup where we say that you can, if you're this or that kind of organization, you can apply for this amount of money doing this.
And typically a call has a fundamental theme. So there's something that part of the agenda, what from policy we want to improve on, gets framed down into a call where money is set aside. And then basically, if you wanted to work on federated machine learning type problems, there is a call for this.
Yes.
So maybe we should have a look at the webpage. It's a good one.
Perhaps you can search for the federated learning testbed. I think that's the proper name for the call, even though it's maybe closed.
Yeah, so it's a concrete example, right?
Yes, let's see if we can find it, or
is it another call that you'd prefer?
I think
I wouldn't go that way. I would actually go straight into the Vinnova website, and how would I orientate myself if I'm really curious?
Then we have a good example. So this is one of the calls that perhaps been closed, but
it's
still
okay.
open.
Okay.
No, this is the actual project. So if you go back to vinnova.se.
Yeah. So let's go in here. I'm listening to this podcast and I get super excited, and I think this is super cool. But I never really tapped into this world before.
Yeah. And obviously you can read about Vinnova, but you wouldn't bother about that in this instance, right?
No, we just want money.
Yeah. Exactly.
Come on, show me the money.
So you scroll down.
Where's the money?
And you see, stop. Right now, 34 calls for proposals available.
Ooh. No, calls means money, right?
Yeah, that means applying for money.
This is calls. It's a call to apply to be part of projects.
So just to clarify, it's not call for money; it's call for support.
Yes.
Okay, so we need to be a little bit
joking.
politically
Sorry.
Okay.
No, we're after work. I'm joking, so I hope everybody can take that.
So here you can see everyone that is either open or forthcoming. So for example, if you look at individual mobility for applied AI research 2.0. So in this, you can apply for staff exchange. So this is not for an actual project as such. This is either importing someone to your organization, if you like, if I'm crude.
Super cool.
Or you can send someone in your organization abroad to learn more.
So it's actually different ways how you can get support, not only money. We're talking now is also an exchange.
This is very important.
Very cool.
I think this is a topic by itself, because we were talking about talent and AI, and we believe that is the key. So let's move on.
Yeah.
I think also the actual calls from Vinnova, if you compare that to a lot of other funding organizations that do exist, both in Sweden and especially in US
is
or
way
in
better than
Europe.
way better than most.
I must say that the actual funding process and the application process is actually surprisingly simple. What's your thinking behind how to make that process as simple as you have made?
It's really a long journey.
You said that you worked quite a bit. This was your last GD's focus, was to get this smooth, which is a fantastic focus, by the way.
And perhaps you could call it as, the factory, really. Our key mission here is to ensure that our money makes a difference. And one part of that is to ensure that it's easy to apply. How easy we can make it is another thing, because there are rules that we have to abide to. Yeah. As easy as possible, but also as clear as possible. Yes. You can see a shift there if you go back 10 years and look at the language that we used compared to now. It's been more simplified, and we're really trying. It's obviously hard to ensure that everyone understands what we mean and so forth.
And it is a difference. I know in Peltarion, and you have an academic background as a PhD, and in academia people are used to applying for grants to get their PhDs, but I don't have that. But I'm an entrepreneur. I have some great ideas. I really want to work in collaborative ways. I think I am a perfect fit for this, but it's a fairly big hurdle for me, who is even not a dumb guy, but I'm not academically trained in these. It is a hurdle.
It certainly is.
So this is great what you're trying to do. I mean, like, to make it simpler is really, really important. And also the language.
Yeah, we're certainly trying. Nice. And one of the important questions that you raise now, or topic, is really the target group.
Yes.
Because sometimes we do target researchers, and then it's a different ball game, isn't it?
Yeah.
So one good example of that is the innovative startups, which is coming call.
That touche, right?
Yeah.
That is not typically academics. Maybe.
Certainly not. And what we really are trying to do there is to ensure that the questions that we pose is important for us in terms of evaluating, but also that they can help the startups themselves. So,
to think.
Yeah, to think. If they don't get the funding, at least they have improved their idea, their plan for how to execute on that.
So if you do it smart, you help them sharpen their pitch.
Yeah, certainly.
And speaking about how to make an application, I think a lot of people would love to hear your
examples of
how
to win.
And the good and bad examples. You've probably seen a lot
topic. Let me get my notebook. I really want to get this right.
How many actual calls do you review yourself?
Record it, Goran. Me and Goran, we've been looking at this and we don't get anything. Record this now. Are you doing it? Yeah.
And to be honest, this is a tricky area to go into. Not in terms of that, I can have a lot of advice. But it's easy to get judgmental or disrespectful without meaning it, because obviously there's a lot of hard work behind each application. Even though we might, I wouldn't say frowned upon, but we can see that certainly not good enough to get funding. So that's tricky. But my first advice would be, just pick anyone that you don't know from the street and ask them, can I explain my pitch to you in 90 seconds? And if they understand, then you're onto something.
This is what last week we talked about the bar.
The bar test, yeah.
The bar test. It's actually really true. Yeah.
I mean, it's also like, what Einstein says or Feynman says, if you can't explain a topic to a person that's not familiar to it, you actually don't understand it yourself.
No.
I think it's really true in so many ways.
Painful when you're starting something new and you know it really well and you can sell it when you get 10,000 words. It's like but ask me to explain it in 1,000 words. Yeah. Then you need to be really on top of it.
Yeah, certainly. And the next step would be to explain it to a colleague or someone that knows the area. And if you can convince them, or at least make them understand why this is important without too many objections.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a challenge because the more innovative or risk-taking you are, the more objections there will be. So differentiate between understanding objections and operationalize, or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
And then something as simple as never write an application by yourself.
Right.
No matter how smart you are or how good you are at writing, you will always fall down into, being blind to your own text.
That's a great advice.
And it's
so what do you mean? A friend, or even someone who has, even better, someone who's written it before, who knows how to write applications?
That would be my advice.
Because I get really, intimidated. I must say, I get intimidated. I've been looking at a couple of them. Now I'm going to write it. And then for some reason, I find excuses not to do it. To me, this is intimidation or something that makes me not, what do you call it? Stretch your bow in this particular area.
Yeah. And
I don't think I'm the only one who thinks like this because I don't know it. It's very far outside my comfort zone.
And I think you can use different techniques there. Personally, if I would do it, I would do, one PowerPoint picture.
Yeah.
Because if you can get the concept in order, then you can start writing.
Oh, so you like a process where you actually try to make a pitch deck.
Yeah.
In PowerPoint, because then you understand the disposition sort of thing. And then you try to, okay, what would I have said to this PowerPoint? And then you capture wordings like that.
Yeah. And so personally, I would start with the result and then the introduction, because those are the most important part. The transportation between those.
And what is result and what is introduction in a good application? What should be in there typically?
So really, what will you achieve? I wouldn't stretch it too far ahead. Sometimes you get people talking about 5-10 years ahead. It's good to have that vision. But
what's the project? Well, if I get this funding, what will I reach? What's the result out of this funding?
Yeah.
Cool. And I'm actually been over reviewing myself, and I've been going through that a number of times. And I remember one example. I saw this awesome application, and I thought, "This is a perfect idea. I love it." Unfortunately, it didn't match the call at all. And it was so annoying. I was trying to convince the other people, you can see this is how, super high impact, it may not really explain, how it matched the actual call, but you see the point. And everyone, but, this is not the right call for it. Sorry.
That's sad, isn't it?
It's super frustrating.
So this is important also to truly match. Okay, so how do I read the call to what are the triggers where I understand? I mean, I need to know how to read, right? but the call to me, that's almost right. But you need to be quite sharp on the target of the call.
Yeah, and I think an important question to pose to yourself is that: is it worth it? If I don't get funding, is it worth putting in this effort? And if the answer is doubt,
the call is not really sharp, so I'm winging it. No, then it's not. But this is my call. Then of course it would be worth it.
Yeah, and then unfortunately, one of the really, at least in my opinion, and I probably reviewed I don't know how many thousand applications now.
Yeah,
the most common mistake really is not to use the spacing in a good manner. Obviously, different calls have different setups, but what you often see if there's in a section on what's the background, what's the state of the art, and a lot of people when they apply, they explain the idea as such, but there's a different section for that, and you haven't really positioned your idea by comparing your idea to the state of the art or state of practice.
So they haven't done their homework in some way to really compare to what's out there otherwise and do the background research. And the format is such to really follow to really understand what this section's purpose is all about, is to compare and contrast. Now here is where you tell your story.
I have a question. Is there a best practice that people can actually get from Vinnova? So for example, this is how you do a pitch. This is how you do a slide deck.
This is a nice deck. This is a good example of a winning.
Because we can understand that not many people are as you said, like comfortable or not versatile in order to create those type of even the difference between you sending a proposal and sending a Ramaftal, right? Like
RFQ.
It's a mastery by itself, right?
Yeah, I'm kick-ass.
So do you have any? You need to help some. Otherwise, they need to hire lawyers to write that, and that is 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 crowns, right?
Yeah, it's a tricky question because on the one hand, I would love to say, yes, this is sort of like how you do it, more in an operational term. But there's also a big pitfall there because if you follow someone else's recipe, you might, be deviating from your idea or, the best way to do your project or your application. Yeah. And you might also deviate from the actual call, because it's different between different calls, really. How you write a good application for an innovative startup and how you write a good application in terms of we are 15 organizations that are going to cooperate by building this awesome data lab, something different. But the general, tips
in general, yes.
Other than what we have, said now, ensure that you actually answer the questions and so forth.
Classic.
But there's a lot of general advice out there that you can find. What's a good pitch? A, B, C. You can find that.
Yeah.
But what I would perhaps state that is not so obvious that a lot of applications fall on is how do you position your idea? A lot of them have great ideas, but if I Google for 5 minutes, I can often find, there's 5 solutions already out there, or there's already 1,500 research articles, or 500 patents on this topic. So I think have a structure in the way that you do your your review of both state of the art in terms. For me, that's research, and state of the practice. You can do that by just Googling or using PRVs, the Patent Bureau of Patents. They have a great tool where you can,
So it really shows that you understand or are humble about your idea in the context of the world.
Yes, but
it's of course obvious.
But it's a little bit of like you're not helping them if you provide the general guidelines, okay? Because if the idea is bad, you will see it, right? But not many people will actually start, if you sit and Google and find like 5 competitors, of course they should be do the business canvas from the beginning, right? But in the same time, there will be a lot of minimizing time for your review. If people actually, you give them guidelines, they're like, hey, if you find that 5 people are actually, doing this, you should state that. So at least right? So you don't have to Google that. So I don't think that there is something wrong is actually providing general counsel in how they should look like, but not the specifics, because bad idea is a bad idea. Good idea is a good idea, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Just because, we get speakers, right? And it took like 2 years for us to create like a form that will make them to sharpen up their speaker offerings. So a title, subtitle, what is this conference, what is this session all about? Key takeaways, for whom it is it a business, technical, or organization wise? So just basically to guide them to structure it, because when I read it, I immediately know, okay, this is not for us, this is good for us. So it's basically a health tool for you as well, somehow. And not many people are very sharp to actually do that. Imagine you're a 25-year-old, you have a great idea, but you don't know how to structure this.
Perhaps it could be a new service for Vinnova or something, to have like a trainee school or something,
Or
how to write an application,
AI
or how to
template.
pitch your idea.
But many
or
people
something.
will pay for it. I would pay for it.
Yeah.
I would even pay for it too.
I would pay for it.
But there are, as you said, there's actors on the markets. There's a balance between, are we going to be both, the accusator, the judge, and the defender?
That's a good one. That's a good. You need to find your spot as well.
Cool. And I love the phrasing you said, state of the art, we all know, and basically connected to research in many use cases. But I haven't heard about the state of the practice kind of thing. But I really like that concept.
That's a good one.
So it's a good term. Any upcoming calls that you feel extra excited about that you can perhaps talk about?
Well, obviously, as I mentioned before, we're in a strategy process now. Personally, with respect to AI, I would love to see, and we are in the planning phase. I can't say it's not confirmed, but we are looking at data labs, because that has been, in my opinion, something very important. So we're looking at 2 tracks there. One is we have 16 labs that are up and running, or at least they're working. Can we do something to accelerate those, especially those with big potential, to make sure that they're not just good, but excellent? So that's one track. And the other one is to look at, all right, we have these 16 labs. What are we missing in the portfolio? So one example, which links to another track, is AI in the service of the climate.
Climate, yeah.
So we have that call with Formas that is upcoming. It's more research oriented, but there's, what we can see is that there's always a challenge with data, isn't it? Yeah. But good climate related data is one that we could benefit from. So I think that's one example where we would like to see something.
I think the data labs are really great, but if I were to give some advice, it's also about how to truly operationalize them. I mean, how to take, even if you have a data set, it's not sufficient sometimes. Even if you have a model, it's not sufficient sometimes. Even if you have a code base, it's not really sufficient. But to really learn and be able to understand the best practices, so to speak, of how to bring value into your organization. I think a lot of companies
let's take 10 minutes to pitch. What are the... Now we flip it a little bit because...
we pitch him.
Let's discuss a couple of topics. Why don't we have calls on this that is completely missing in the opinion of Henrik and Anders?
Oh, we have so many topics. You spent an hour already just speaking about Vinnova here.
No, but I mean, I let me pitch one then.
Okay.
Bring it on.
And Anders, I don't even, I'm used to putting the knife where Anders started to rip it. Operationalizing AI is so much more than data, open data and models. And you can have a week's discussion on operationalizing AI, what that really means. And we have already understood that it's quite much more than the model itself. So the whole idea that, I need to hire data scientists to do a model. That was sort of, for the people who's been in a journey, we are past that in 2016. Most of the people in Sweden has not passed that, by the way. And then we have people who are talking about, you need to have all this stuff around data engineering. So you need to understand how you operationalize AI. And this is where the conversation is right now. And we talk about data ops. So we're talking about not the open data or data lab, but actually what are the ways of working and processes. And then we come to the next level where actually that is not enough either, because you need to operationalize AI from a business perspective. How do you commercialize AI? And the core topics that we end up with is that this is a huge interdisciplinary topic, number one. Number two, forget about driving this as a project, because it doesn't work like that anymore. It works, continuous learning and iteration. It's about drip feeding and maturing. So it's a completely different operating model. It's a completely different governance. So, I can go on forever, right? So,
I know.
So I stopped there. So where is the topics, how you apply for topics that really makes a difference so I can take AI on? So there's not a technology problem we have in Scania or Volvo or in Mycronic. It's the fundamental ways of working problem we have. It's an orchestration problem we have. And I haven't seen one single call on the orchestration problem. That's the real problem, in my opinion. So that was my...
Well, what we have done, I can say, because I totally agree. And that was one of the reasons why we, just before summer, made investigation into that. So we have funded some researchers at Chalmers and Mälardalens högskola to look into innovation management practices in relation to AI. Because if you look at that area, they're really just separated in terms of research, aren't they?
Yes.
AI and innovation management. We really need to start linking that together.
Yes.
And one interesting example I heard of, because when we did our Elements of AI at Vinnova, we did a study circle on that, invited external guests. And one of them was from Arbetsförmedlingen, the employment agency. No, it was Försäkringskassan. So it was so interesting to hear about this connection between technology and management, because they had digitalized a lot of their services. So, for example, if your kid is sick, you can do that yourself, right? So what you saw that a lot of people in all ages of group had a bank ID, so they could do that. And the number of calls that went into the first line support went down rapidly. So all of a sudden you have, I think it was 1,100 employees in the first line support that was dealing with devilishly difficult questions, because the easy ones they could solve themselves. Now they have all the hard questions. So now they had to reorganize in terms of, well, let's reduce the first line support, bring them back, reskill them, bring in technology to the first line support with the help of AI. They haven't solved this yet, so they can get automatic transcription of the actual discussion with the client, to get suggestions on what questions to pose, and then get direction to what are the key documents to look at. Obviously they're not there, but it's a good example of that interrelation.
But I think this is, sorry for being a little bit like this, but this is a true passion. If you want to operationalize AI, you need to put this in context. So then we need to have other types of funding for other types of learnings.